Hello, good morning. Welcome back to Research Exchange, where evidence meets understanding. I'm your host, Laeeq Khan, and today I have a truly special guest, Dr. Steve Lacy. Dr. Lacy is a scholar who has shaped how communication researchers think about rigor, method, and meaning for decades. His work on content analysis and research methodology has influenced generations of scholars, including me personally. Steve has also served as my dissertation chair at Michigan State University School of Journalism. So this conversation is both a professional honor and a personal one. Steve, it's genuinely great to have you here.
It's great to be with you, Laeeq, and thank you for those very kind words. They're appreciated.
My pleasure. So I'll start with something big and maybe a little philosophical. You've spent a career thinking deeply about what makes research good. When you look back, what do you think separates research that endures, work that people are still reading and citing 20 years later, or research that just fades away?
I want to start with a little terminology discussion, and this is my personal use of terminology. So others may use it, others may not. When I say research, I think of it as a subdivision of scholarship.
Mhm.
Communication research, communication scholarship. The other subdivision of scholarship is theory creating. And this is consistent with what you find in some other social sciences like economics, where you have theorists and you have econometricians who are the researchers who use data. So research can be theory-based or it can be practical. Practical involves answering very specific questions that are oriented towards solving a problem or finding a specific answer that you want to have. Theory-based is any research that contributes to the creation of theory. And certainly much of the theory in communication is inductive, based on empirical findings. A scholarship that endures contributes to either theory creation or to methodology, improving our ability to measure, our ability to analyze, etc. In other words, it contributes to social science, part of that social science wheel. This is what Newton said when he said he stood on the shoulders of giants. What he meant is he stood on the shoulders of other people who contributed to methodology, who contributed to creating theory. Now, this doesn't mean that practical research is not important. It's extremely useful and very important to society. But if you want people to be reading your research and citing your research, if you want it to outlive you, in effect, it needs to be about methodology or theory-based.
That is such an important distinction that you highlight. And I love how you're pointing out to that enduring research isn't just technically sound, it has to be based on methodology and proper theory that connects to it. Which brings me to the next question. Today, a lot of young scholars seem drawn straight to methods. They're very attracted to the tools, the software, the statistical packages, the metrics that they can run. They want to learn the technique, which is great, and I get it. The techniques are exciting, but what do they miss if they skip the theory? And what's the cost of leading with method instead of meaning?
Well, all of that is important. The methodology, the techniques, because you have to test theory.
Mhm.
Theory is an abstraction, it's a generalization, and you have to convert that into concrete data that can be used to see if its predictions are accurate. The goals of theory are to explain some activity or phenomenon, to predict. That's extremely useful. What's going to be economic activity next year? It's to create a sense of understanding. Not only can we predict and explain, but we truly understand the mechanism behind this. And last, it can allow some people to try and change things. So sound theory can be the basis of good policy. Kurt Lewin, a sociologist, once said, "There's nothing so practical as a good theory because it explains a lot." It's as simple as that. Now, to do all of this, theory creates abstractions, generalizations about the relationships among things that we do. Because human behavior is probabilistic and varies, research alone cannot do that. Research is a photo in time. It's a snapshot. It tells you something at a particular time. A theory that is useful needs to apply across time. Newton's theories still apply today on Earth. There are new theories, relativity, that explains what happens away from Earth, but Newton is still useful here. It's applied some 400 years later.
Right.
And it's useful in our everyday activity. So just research projects cannot do that. They can contribute to our understanding and our testing of theory. So if they skip the theory part, they basically have only one portion of the scientific method.
Sure.
So now this, again, theory is important. So is methodology. And oftentimes that's not neglected. And methodology includes things like how do you do content analysis or survey, or how do you measure things? This is a huge element, particularly in the area of neuroscience. So how are we going to use MFRI scanning to better understand the brain? That's a process that's still being worked out now. So if you skip the theory, you also skip the chance of having enduring research, but your research just doesn't contribute as much to how we perceive and understand our environment.
Absolutely. So it is, we can rightly say that theory isn't just a checkbox, a box that we need to check. It's the main intellectual groundwork before ever collecting a single data point, because we want our work to endure, and without theory, that doesn't seem very likely.
Right.
So moving on, I'm always fascinated by people who have created theories and contributed to this body of knowledge and understanding that and some of those theories are still enduring today. What does it actually mean to build a theory? Not to review one, not to apply one, but to build one.
Right. But one of the issues that Pam Shoemaker and I have dealt with in writing this book, Creating Social Science Theories, is what does a theory look like? A simple definition of a social science theory is a set of systematically related statements that explain the relationships among a collection of concepts. Now, in that, there are particular elements of theory. And then there are some elements that are not in that very simple definition. A couple of elements that are not in there, and are often left out of theory articles. First are the assumptions.
Right.
Assumptions are generalizable statements that are accepted if you're going to accept this theory. They are the things that you have to accept in order for the theory to make sense. Social science cannot create a theory of everything, and you shouldn't be responsible for explaining everything in a theory. So we tend to have what's called middle range theories that address particular types of behaviors and mental processes. So it's important that we express those assumptions. For example, an assumption of neoclassical microeconomic theory is that people make rational decisions that aim to maximize their utility.
Right.
That's an assumption. It's also an assumption that allows them to use math that I'll get to in a second. A second part of an element of theory is a statement of the boundary conditions. Some people talk about this as a domain of the theory. It's the behaviors and the activities and the mental processes that are addressed by the theory. We should be very explicit that this theory deals with these things. Other things that are not in within these boundaries are exogenous. They're outside of this theory, this system. So we're not dealing with those.
Right.
That way, the reader can't hold you responsible for not creating theory about what I want them to create it about.
Right.
So it's important that we explain this is the boundary of our theory. And if the reader doesn't care about those boundaries, then they can move on to another theory or do something else. Mentioned in that very short definition, concepts and definitions, theoretical definitions of those concepts. Concepts are simply abstractions that describe some part of reality, like cognitive dissonance. Age is a concept, political participation, media content. There are thousands and thousands of concepts, and they're somewhat artificial. They represent activities in reality, but still they're abstractions of that. But you have to define them very specifically and precisely, because if you don't, two researchers testing the theory may interpret those concepts to mean different things.
Mm-hmm.
And they would result in research that disagrees. And so what do you do with the theory? So the concepts need to be defined explicitly in detail.
Mm-hmm.
Another element are theoretical statements that connect the concepts and the linkages, the why that those concepts are connected. For example, something I've been interested in my career, competition between two news organizations. As competition between two news organizations become more intense, one or both will increase their financial commitment to the newsroom.
Right.
Okay, now the linkage. Why should this happen? Okay, well, investing in the newsroom allows the staff to generate more original content of higher quality, more facts, more sources, more detail, more depth. This will make the news output more appealing to the audience, the readers or the viewers. And it may bring in some audience members that are not currently there. This, in turn, will make them more appealing to advertisers, which allows the news organization to make more money, which allows them to invest more.
Right.
So that's the linkage. So your statements that need to have an explanation of why, but they also have to be systematic, which means that they depend upon each other in the logic of the theory. Think of theory as a system.
Mm-hmm.
This is a system, an abstraction that explains the system in reality. And it has to be connected to be a theory. Now, there are basically two ways of creating theory. Now, I apologize for this being long.
No, this is very important. I really appreciate those insights. Yeah.
Theory can be created using mathematics, calculus, algebra, set theory, etc. And that's the long tradition in economics and some parts of political science. It's called formal analysis by economists. There is also natural language theory. Natural language is simply the languages that we use every day that develop naturally over time.
Mm-hmm.
They're not stuck in time. Calculus today is pretty much like the calculus at Newton. There have been some changes and additions, but it's still basically the same thing. English, Spanish, French, Arabic, any language in the world has changed and will change. Natural language uses informal logic and is presented in the language that it's developed in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, each of these approaches is worthwhile, and each has its strengths and weaknesses. Natural language theory creation and building has had less attention paid to it, and we'll get to that in a second. We'll talk about communication. Formal analysis, for example, starts with assumptions. Mm-hmm. Math is simply a collection of logic systems. You start with assumptions, and the particular type of math allows you to come to conclusions. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so it has that strength. You can start with these assumptions, these given, and then deduce what we should know about this process.
Right.
But it can only be understood by people who understand math. Absolutely. Which excludes most of the people in the world.
Right.
And so if it's nice to depend upon experts to create policy or change, mm-hmm. but it's better if the people who are depending on the experts can understand what they're talking about.
Exactly.
And so math is fine. It's a wonderful approach, but it's limited at how many people can really understand it. Another thing is the assumptions are not always consistent with reality. Mm-hmm. I just told you the assumptions underlying neoclassical microeconomic theory about individual decision makers. Well, there's been research by psychologists. A man named Kahneman, for example, just won a Nobel Prize in economics, even though he's a psychologist, because what he has found and his colleagues over time is that people tend not to be rational decision makers.
True.
Some are in some situations, not in others, except it's a complicated process. So the assumption is a bit overly simple, It still allows us to predict to a certain degree, but it doesn't allow us to explain.
Sure.
If we assume everybody is rational, how do we explain decisions that fly in the face of that? And we're seeing a lot of those recently.
Right, exactly.
So there are weaknesses, but natural language theory also has its problems. If the theorists cannot write clearly and concisely, then there will be misunderstandings.
True.
And so it's tough to test and replicate the theory. There is, and this is an important thing, there is no generally accepted format for presenting natural language theory. Math has a format. It is math. And so if you understand math, you can look at a formal theory and the format's there. It's in the equations.
And
so without a generally accepted form of presentation, and this is something that we are including and trying to work on in the book, and not every theorist is well versed in informal logic. There is an area within logic that is called informal. That's the logic we use every day, and it's based a lot on things we learned in algebra, things that people have taught us independent of math, etc. But it does exist. It is studied. There is a literature of it. So one of the things that we hope to do is to create at least a beginning set of guidelines for presenting natural language theory. We don't expect everybody to accept those and use them, but it would be nice if we started a discussion and social science developed a format that is parallel to math.
Absolutely. And I really like how you link it to the importance of mathematics in understanding a lot of this phenomena. And this is something I also tell my students as well, that, you need to be able to look at things mathematically so that they make more sense. And also, you also very rightly talked about the boundaries of what makes a theory, which which brings me to the next thing about content analysis, which has really been at the core of your scholarly identity. You've written the definitive work on it. It's a matter of pride when I tell my students that this is Stephen Lacy who wrote this book on content analysis, and I've learned from him firsthand. But today we're seeing so much digital transformation taking place, and the landscape is shifting. We now have algorithms doing in minutes what used to take teams of coders months. So how has the method evolved in these new realities, and what do you think what does the future of content analysis look like?
I'll do my best, but like everybody looking at the future, some of it's a guess. First, it's important to realize that content analysis as a social science method is young. It can really be traced in 1955. There was a conference, an interdisciplinary conference held at a place called Allerton Estates, which is sort of a castle owned by University of Illinois. And from that, the sociologist, and at the time, communication was only 7 years old as a field. But there were communication scholars there, et cetera. And from that grew this interest in this development of content analysis. So I was 7 when that took place. So it's not that old, unless you think I'm really old, in which case I guess it is. But still, it hasn't been around nearly as long as survey, which dates to the 1800s. The application of experimental design to social sciences, which happened primarily in psychology and began basically in the 40s and 50s. So those methods have been around. Also, content analysis is one of those, I won't say it's uniquely communication, but most of the scholars have come out of communication, because there are many scholars in other fields, sociology, economics, political science, psychology, et cetera, who are frightened of messages because they're so hard to deal with. They're hard to measure. But content analysis is a way. It's not a perfect way. It has its limitations, but it is a way of measuring messages. Now, a great deal of that development over the years, Klaus Krippendorf, who was at University of Pennsylvania, is a huge contributor to all of that. And a lot of that development from 1955 to say 2000, 2010, et cetera, had to do with improving the process of establishing reliability and understanding the very nature of the method. So when you're dealing with data and conclusions from those data, there are two things. The process has to be reliable and it has to be valid. Reliability is a condition of validity, but it in and of itself will not establish validity.
Mhm.
So initially, people who were using the method thought the goal was simply to get coders to agree. And if the coders agreed, then okay, it was reliable. And they use these very simple agreeability indices.
Right.
Well, it also led to very minimal protocols, which made it very difficult to replicate because you would have like a couple of words that were supposed to guide the coders. But what we now realize is the heart of reliability is the protocol itself, the instrument. Just like the questionnaire is the heart of survey, the protocol of a content analysis is essential to replication and being able to use those variables across studies.
Absolutely.
So it's, your coders have to change for replication. They have to be trained coders. You can't pick people off the street and expect them to be able to analyze media content. You have to train them, but that can be done. In addition, reliability coefficients have evolved to the point that when they are calculated, they take chance into consideration. Because making decisions, you can make a decision by flipping a coin. You can code content by basically flipping a coin. So we now have reliability coefficients that are not simple agreement, but take the impact of chance into consideration. And it's important that those are used. Scholars have also developed more efficient ways of sampling and ways of getting a reliability sample that can represent the total content. We've conducted content analyses of articles that use the method, and we've basically found these things to be changing across that period of time. It has gotten more rigorous, it has gotten more precise, and there has become more agreement as to what this process should look like. And so 11 years ago, colleagues of mine and I put together an article for Journalism Mass Communication Quarterly. It was called The Best Practices of Content Analysis. And it was based on our book, Krippendorf's books, Kim Nurendorf's books, research in the area. And it was an effort to standardize the steps of content analysis. I have reviewed hundreds and hundreds of content analysis research in my career. And there are many people who don't quite get it. Part of that is I think reflects the fact that not all doctoral programs have courses just in content analysis.
Right.
You'll find more that have courses in survey and experimental design, and yet our method is oftentimes neglected. One other thing. So content analysis is also evolved, is best used with other forms of data. Initially, it was used just to describe things,
Right.
How are women represented in magazines or on television, et cetera, et cetera. And there were lots of those, and those are fine because we had to know those things before we could identify problems. But content analysis is central to the communication process. There are antecedent variables that determine the content, and there are outcome variables that happen when people access the content.
Right.
And so you can study how antecedents, economic factors, sociological factors affect the content that's created. Then you can study, for example, agenda setting studies how the content affects the public agenda. Those are outcome variables. Or you can actually do them all together, which is a wonderful study because you can see the entire chain of factors that make content, the impact of content. So anyway, that's the way it's basically changed over the years. Most importantly, it's become more rigorous.
Right. And with the advent of, you very well explained how, what rigor looks like and how the importance of the protocol, and I completely concur. So what is the role of artificial intelligence in assisting with this method?
Right. Well, first let me look at three very quick things. Big data. I am not nearly impressed with big data unless it represents an entire population.
Okay.
One of the biggest problems in any research is sampling error, measurement error. If you use probability samples, you can estimate sampling error. That's what statistical significance is about.
Right.
Big data, if it's not randomly selected and is not a population of all the content, still has sampling error.
Right.
But people, it's
Ignore
big.
that.
Well, we'll ignore it. But the problem is, yes, anything's going to be statistically significant, but statistical significance means nothing with a non-probability sample.
Exactly.
So big data is great if it's a population. If it's not, I don't see the advantage over a good random selection of 2,000 items. Also, big data has to be analyzed by computer because it's too big to hire enough humans to do it. So big data, algorithms, entirely different. So initially, computers were used to classify content. It was basically a dictionary approach. And so you tell a computer, these words go in this group, these words go in this group. Now, underlying that is an assumption about the meaning of those words, both the denotation, dictionary definition, and connotation, which is the meaning that we bring as individual users of those words or small group users. And so, the thought process, it's being applied to everything, so there's not a reliability problem, but they never address the validity issue.
Absolutely.
And that's the key. So it can be reliable as anything, but if it doesn't measure what it's supposed to measure, then it doesn't really mean anything.
And that,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. And that actually nails it. So if we don't think about the reliability, we're doing a disservice to the profession because we're not really thinking about things that really matter to make it rigorous.
Yeah.
And let's close on something a little more personal. If you would give one advice to young scholars today, maybe somebody sitting in a graduate seminar, a doctoral candidate full of ambition but uncertain about their path, what would that advice be?
Okay, try not to scrimp on coursework. That's hard for some people. Some people have financial problems. They have commitment to other people. My PhD program at Texas required 60 credits to graduate. I took 80. I did that for a very specific reason. Most of those additional courses were in method and statistics. I can read and get all the information about what exists as a body of knowledge by myself. It's a lot easier to get method and math or any other sort of research tool when you have a professor who has used that. And so I invested heavily in that. And a lot of that was interdisciplinary, outside of communication. So I would, and this is becoming an issue because just at the time communication has boomed, we've got all these PhD professors who want to teach PhD students, and the number of credits are oftentimes reducing in order to recruit students. It makes it difficult to invest, and it makes it difficult to be interdisciplinary. But if you can, invest in those two things. It will help you tremendously in your career once you get out and get started.
This is golden advice that you're sharing. So investing your time in methods which are rigorous, if you can, and also making sure that you're focused on the quality of work and not just work itself, so you can become a scholar of impact. And there's so much to learn from you as we move forward. You're an excellent example of that, Steve. This has truly been a privilege and an honor. You've given our audience, researchers, students, practitioners, a lot to think about. The clarity you bring to the questions of theory, method, and purpose is exactly what ResearchXChange is here to capture. Thank you so much for sharing your time and insight.
Well, you're welcome. It's great to see you again, Laeeq.
The pleasure's mine. And to our viewers, if this conversation sparked something for you, share it with a colleague, a student, anyone trying to do better research. As always, stay curious, stay connected, and keep asking questions. Subscribe to Research Exchange, and we'll see you next time where evidence meets understanding. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.